I'm Laura Seeger. I'm the orchard coordinator here at MOFGA, and I'm going to tell you some of the key points to taking care of your young apple trees in the summer. A brief overview on some of the things you need to keep your tree healthy and alive during the summer. 5 gallons of water a week if it's not rainy, wood chips or seaweed mulch, optional pea stone gravel, look for borers, keep the weed whacker away from the trunks of your trees, and keep an eye out for pests and disease that can afflict the leaves. One of the most essential things to keeping your young apple tree alive in the summer is to make sure it has enough water. We try to water trees in their first year of planting about once a week with 5 gallons of water unless it rains. Plant the trees with a bit of a basin around them so that it's easy for the water to be retained in the tree's planting hole. We use hardwood chips to help retain moisture in the soil. As you can see, there are beneficial fungi. There are starting to be some mycorrhizal growth, fungus roots, I guess. So those help with retaining any moisture that's already here, which is essential, especially in our droughty summers that we've been having. It's important to keep your young trees weeded, and the wood chips help with weed suppression, though they don't keep the weeds at bay entirely. The most important part of your tree's understory to keep weeded is the immediate area about a foot around it, the base. We use this pea stone mulch. We try to put about 2 to 3 inches of pea stone gravel to prevent weeds from growing right at the center so that it becomes easier to spot any damage to the trunk. You can see that this tree has a bit of weed whacker damage. On the side facing me, there are a couple of nicks as well. Fortunately, this tree does not have damage from borers. The round-headed apple tree borer is one of the worst pests for young apple trees. So in addition to making sure your tree is well mulched with wood chips, hardwood chips, or seaweed if you're by the coast, and optionally using some pea stone gravel for weed suppression and keeping your tree watered, you'll also want to stake your tree and label it. So this tree has been staked from these 2 sides because this tree has a pretty significant lean over towards my left. So this is just to help keep that in place and get the trunk to grow upright. So in addition to keeping your tree staked, and it may need 3 or 4 stakes to make it a bit more secure depending on your site. It's also important to label your tree. We use these white pieces of vinyl siding. You could use any color. We just cut a small piece, make a hole in it, and attach it with a wire. And if you write with a pencil in fairly bold font, you should be able to read your label for years to come. And from here, we're going to go over to another tree that has a pretty good example of what borer damage looks like. If you keep your trees well weeded and keep a good layer of mulch and maybe some pea stone gravel, you'll be more likely to spot the borers earlier on before they do much damage. You'll also want to probably cut any root sprouts that are coming up. Those will not be the variety that you grafted. So get those out of the way. And then you could do a more thorough job weeding than I've done right here. But the most important thing is that you come in with your knife, just start scraping away at the damage where the borer was living, and you can follow that hole. It oftentimes will go up or down, but they can move around to the side as well. Don't be afraid to cut into the tree. You're going to do a lot less damage than the borers have already done. This is a borer. This is a fairly large borer. If I hadn't sliced its head off, you could see a bit easier that it has a pretty round head compared to its slender body. You may find a borer that's only about 1/4 of an inch long. They can grow up to probably be an inch or possibly a bit more before they go ahead and pupate and then turn into a beetle and create these exit holes, fly out of the tree and reproduce and lay more eggs in more apple trees. Okay, now that we've gotten rid of that borer, you're going to want to check the rest of the trunk to make sure there aren't more. I've found as many as 17 borers living in a single trunk this summer in the trees that we haven't kept a close eye on. So if you've gotten out all of the borers, you've done a good check and the trunk looks clear, something that we do for a little extra borer prevention is we use this, this mixture of Surround, neem oil, and Thyme Guard, which are all sort of borer repellents and general pest repellents. Sorry, that needs... So we use this mixture and we paint the entire trunk with this neem, Thyme Guard, and Surround mixture. You can see sort of the line from last year where we painted, we try to do an annual trunk paint on each of these trees. The recipe that we've been working with this year is equal parts neem oil and Thyme Guard and about equal parts in volume, not weight, of Surround mixed in so that it looks kind of like a honey mustard dressing. The borers are most likely to lay their eggs in the base of the tree up to about 1.5 feet tall, but I've also seen borers while I was pruning trees up with a ladder. So they could be anywhere, but most likely they'll be in a weedy spot just at the base of your young fruit trees, apple trees. Fortunately, the apple tree borers do not affect plums, peaches, or pears, though there are peach tree borers. We then make sure none of the roots are exposed. You can just put some of the soil and wood chips back, or if you're using a pea stone gravel, you can use that for further weed suppression. And it's a good idea after you've found borers in a tree to come back the same summer and check again to look for new frass in case there are a few that you missed. Another pest to keep an eye out for, especially in years lately, is the brown-tail moth. They lay their eggs in the summer. The females are a white moth that they carry around this little brown tail, which they end up leaving behind, which is covering their eggs. And if you open this up, they've just started hatching about a week ago now. It's mid-August. And there are hundreds of little tiny caterpillars in here right now. These caterpillars, even at this stage, you can see they're two small dots if you look very closely. When there are larger caterpillars in the late spring, you'll be able to see their two blaze orange dots really easily. But this time of year, they've just emerged from their little egg nests, and the caterpillars have come out and they're beginning to build this silky nest that they're going to live in all winter. In the winter time, you may have seen up in the tops of oak and apple trees, and there's many other species that they prefer, but you'll see sort of a glistening white nest in the middle of the winter. So as I go through and collect these brown-tail nests throughout the summertime, among other caterpillars, which we'll maybe mention in another video, I collect them either into a paper bag if I don't have a bucket of soapy water on me, or into a bucket, and then you can just dispose of the soapy water and caterpillars later on. Of course, there are many other apple tree pests and diseases that can afflict young trees, but hopefully this is a pretty good start to getting your apple trees kept alive and healthy through the summer.